best movies of 2018. The best movies of 2018. It's 2019 now. You know what that means? It's list time. So, welcome to my top 10 movies of 2018 video. I've been watching a lot of movies recently from 2018, and I thought I'd make a best of list, because I can. And obviously I couldn't get to every single one I wanted to watch, because that would be impossible. So here's a little list of all the ones I wanted to watch, but I just didn't get around to, either because the release dates didn't line up or I was just lazy. And before we get into the list, I've got some honorable mentions. First up, we got First Man, Cold War, Lean on Pete, You Were Never Really Here, and Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs. Now that's out of the way, let's get into the real list. So number 10, we got Sorry to Bother You. This is the feature film debut by director Boots Riley. Now, a lot of people have criticized this movie. They call it messy. They say it's sort of all over the place. And, it kind of is in a way, but I think this pure ambition and sort of scale that Boots Riley's trying to tackle on the first feature is pretty amazing. And the concepts in this movie are really well executed. They build up this sort of sci-fi world in a way where it feels very, very real, There's not any aspects that they introduce in the movie where I felt they weren't earned. There's some very interesting revelations in this movie, but none of them feel like they ruin the movie, if that makes sense. I do have some problems with the ending. I think he might have pushed it a bit far. Like in the last 10 minutes, before that I was totally on board, but for the last 5 minutes I was like, really? Are you sure about that? But besides that, it's a really awesome movie. I love Terry Crews in it. I love the main guy, Lakeith Stanfield. He plays this sort of, washed up, kind of looking for a purpose kind of guy really well. And I just love everything about the presentation and style and ambition of this movie. So, yeah. At number 9, we got Blind Spotting. Now, Blind Spotting, it's another feature film debut by this guy, Carlos Lopez Estrada, and it stars Rafael Casal and David Diggs, who both co-wrote the movie and co-produced it. So it's a passion project for these guys. You may know David Diggs from Hamilton, and he's pretty good in that one. And here he's playing this guy who has 3 days left on his probation. He's just trying to stay out of trouble, trying to navigate the mayhem that is his life. And along the way, they work in, little social commentary kind of things, but it's not like hitting you over the head with it. It's very well worked in. It's very smartly done. And I think it's overall just such an exciting and passionate presentation, the way they do it. It's the editing in this movie is insane. It's so just fast paced and quick and it's just it's hard not to be entertained by this movie, especially when it's this short. So that runtime stops it from feeling overbearing ever, because there's no time to get sick of it, because it's just going so quickly and then it's over and you're like, whoa, where did an hour and a half go? If I had to say one problem I have with it, I'd say that the blend of comedy and drama in some scenes were a bit off-putting. There was this one scene where a guy gets kicked out of a bar and then it's really funny, and then there's a fight and it's supposed to start being really dramatic, but it doesn't really feel dramatic enough. We're still stuck in that comedy area, and I think the tone felt a little inconsistent there, but overall I think the tone and the drama was pretty well balanced. It's just in a couple of spots it was a bit patchy, and there's these sort of rap monologues that Diggs and Cassell have throughout the movie, and they're all just really cool. I don't know if this movie would be considered a musical, but I don't know. It was, each of these scenes is just really compelling, and it's heightened by this rapping and this really fast-paced editing and this really slick sort of directing style. So overall, incredibly entertaining movie. Next up, we have Hereditary, which is the best horror movie I saw this year. It's the directorial debut, I think, of Ari Aster, and this is just a really well-made sort of it's almost a family drama in a way. The most compelling parts of this movie aren't really even the horror elements. It's the dramatic elements. And this movie is not afraid to show you like the darkest parts of the darkest things that can happen to a family of people. And it incorporates those kind of just grief and despair into the feeling of the more supernatural elements in the film. And I think it just incorporates and blends this like dark, brooding tone so well that it's one of the best horror movies I've seen from the past like 5 years, honestly. And I think it would be higher on this list if it weren't for the ending, which I do have some problems with. I know that's a very common complaint with this movie. Everyone's like, oh, the ending's not that good. But I agree with it. It's a bit heavy-handed. It sort of dumps a lot on you at once. A lot of the mystery that was being built up before, it kind of loses that mystique around it. But overall, this was a great horror movie. At number 7, we got Widows. Now, my opinion on this has kind of changed a tiny bit since I saw it at TIFF. I don't think it's like up there in the 9 out of 10. It's probably like a strong 8, but still, it's an amazingly executed heist movie. Every single performance is just top of the line. The action is so well directed, and you know, part of this movie that I do agree with some of the criticisms is that it is a bit cheesy at points. Like there's a lot of, you know, Hollywood-esque things that happen, a lot of twists and stuff, but I think that really just sort of adds to the charm of it in a way, because Steve McQueen is not a very cliche kind of director. If you've seen his movies like 12 Years a Slave or Shame, he's not afraid to shy away from like these dark, twisted themes. And in this movie, it's sort of a heist movie script, but he's not afraid to show some very intense things happening. There's some particular action scenes that make you go like, ooh, or like, it's visceral, you know? Like in a lot of modern action movies, like a lot of Marvel stuff, a lot of the action doesn't have like a weight to it, you know? But I feel like in this movie, you can really feel like each bullet, every crash, and that part of it's due to the way it's filmed. A lot of it has to do with the sound design. And I just think this is a really, really great heist movie. And even though it's probably Steve McQueen's weakest that I've seen since I've been watching some of his movies, I still think this is awesome. So at number 6, we have If Beale Street Could Talk by Barry Jenkins, the director of Moonlight, which won Best Picture at the 2017 Oscars. Now, the way he presents this movie is entrancing. Like, there's this sort of just very rich gold and like reddish chestnut brown color palette, and the score is just so like rich and filling. It fills the space of each scene. It moves the story forward in such an interesting way. And the performances were all just amazing. Regina King, the two leads, they are all sold these characters amazingly well. There's just scenes in this movie where Barry Jenkins creates just such a personal and intimate setting and world, and you're just so wrapped up in the emotions and of the characters, and it's all heightened by this score. You just let the movie just sort of envelop you in its atmosphere, and I think that's what it does perfectly. At number 5, we have Under the Silver Lake. Now this one got kind of mixed reviews from critics, actually. A lot of people find it to just sort of be like a tonal mess, but I think this is like fantastic. Now, it sort of plays into this dreary, like conspiracy atmosphere where this guy, there's just weird things happening in his life, like people go missing and he's trying to figure out what's happening. So he's just walking through this sort of perpetually strange Los Angeles, trying to figure out what's happening and also figure out his life as he's about to be evicted from his apartment. And he's piecing together these clues, and the way the script is written is just such a winding and like fun to follow like presentation, and the editing choices in this movie are all really like stark and bold and ambitious. Like this movie never feels crushed by its own like ambition. I think this movie rides the line perfectly, and there's not a single moment wasted. The pacing is just incredible. There wasn't a second of this movie where I was, bored, like wondering when the next exciting moment's going to happen, because this whole movie just wraps you up in this sort of and this mystery, and it's just so compelling and fun to watch, and I just loved every second of it. Number 4 is The Favorite. Now, this is the new movie by Yorgos Lanthimos, Greek director. His previous 2 English movies I really love, The Lobster and The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Both of them are incredibly good dark comedy. One, Killing of a Sacred Deer, is basically a horror movie, but they both have this sort of just clinical, dark edge and wittiness to them that is just like, it gets under your skin, but you're also laughing at the same time, and it's just, this movie was not written by Yorgos Lanthimos like he did for his previous movies, and instead he's just taking the material of Tony McNamara and Deborah Davis and adding his sort of cold, stark style to it, and I think it just meshes perfectly. Like, this is a comedy, but it's also really messed up. It's like, imagine like this royal court, but all the stuff that the characters are doing to each other is just like really petty and dramatic. And it's like, imagine if Mean Girls was set in 18th century court of Queen Anne and was also good. And I know that might sound kind of bad, but it's actually really well done. This movie could have fallen into the trap of being like overly melodramatic, like, oh no, but it's just so messed up and so well executed. It's just so well shot too. Like, there's these intricate like fisheye lens things, like panning shots across rooms, and everything just feels so textured and real, you know? Like, you're in there with the characters, for every second you're invested. So at number 3 we have First Reformed. Now, this one came out a bit earlier in the year, saw it earlier in the year, and it stars Ethan Hawke, probably in the best performance of the year, by far, in my opinion. He just perfectly, believably, and honestly captures the mind of this man that's been corrupted by this ideology, this radical thought that's come into his head, and it's consuming his life. And it's not done in any like cheesy way. The movie is just executed where you're watching this man just slowly kind of loses his mind, and the cinematography is all very boxed in. It's in the 4:3 Academy ratio, so it feels very claustrophobic, you know, and you feel the tightening of the world around you right with the main character, and I think it really puts you into his head beautifully, and it's a fantastically executed film. Okay, at number 2 we have Burning. This is a movie I saw at TIFF, and I really loved it there. I've rewatched it, and I think it's even better now. And it's just such a layered and complex movie about this guy who just gets obsessed with this one thing in the world around him, this mystery that's just leaves him with this empty sort of desire to solve it. And so the things that he does to try and work out the mystery are so meticulous and so like routine. You're with this character through all his struggles and his thoughts, and you spend most of this movie just alone with him as you just fall into this weird mindset. I'm not going to say too much about the plot, just that it's an incredibly compelling and interesting thriller that will just get you thinking about it for a really long time. I'm still thinking about it like every day since I saw it. So, and number 1, it's Roma, still from TIFF. Still Roma's number 1. I've watched some other movies by Alfonso Cuarón since Roma. I've watched Y Tu Mamá También, which I thought was amazing. 10 out of 10 as well. I think this movie's still a 10 out of 10. This guy might be my favorite living director now. He's just that good. And there's not really much that you can fault about this movie. I think this is like a perfect movie. And really, all the complaints I've seen with it are very subjective things, like, oh, I couldn't connect to the characters that well. But I just disagree. I think even though he shoots it as this like omniscient sort of camera, I think the way he gets the actors to portray these people and the way that he shoots it all in these long sweeping takes gets you quite invested in the world. Like, it feels so real, if that makes sense. Like, you're watching people. You're not watching a movie. You're not watching a movie with actors. You're watching people. And even though the cinematography is so extravagant, like some of the best I've ever seen in my life, it doesn't distract you from the story. And I think the story is also quite compelling, even though it's quite loose. It's tied together by all these like visual motifs and symbols and sort of metaphors. I know that's probably not the best way to describe it, but throughout the movie there's just all these reoccurring things that tie all these sort of loosely scattered events together into this resounding force that is this cleaning lady's life. And I've heard people say, well, who's this movie for? I've heard people say there's no emotion in this movie, but I just disagree with all that, because I was able to get completely emotionally wrapped up in this movie. And I think everyone should watch it. It's on Netflix, and it's amazing. That's all I have to say. Okay, hope you enjoyed the list, everybody. There were still a few movies that I wanted to see, I couldn't see, as I already said. So if I watch those and they end up on the list, I'll update the list in the description. So there's a link in the description to the list right now. And if you're watching this a few months from now, go check it right now and see if there's anything new on there.